Tonight, we are joined by Dan Parrott, CEO and partner at JAX Vineyards in Calistoga, and we are doing a deep dive on the other Cabernet, Cabernet Franc. Sip episode 135. Let's go. Cabernet Franc, it is the other Cabernet, and Dan probably knows, but there used to be a B&B right outside of St. Helena called Black Rock Inn. And Jeff Orlick was the proprietor of Black Rock. Now, sadly, it burned down, I think, in the 2017 fire. But Jeff was one of the foremost Cab Franc fiends or savants in the Valley. And he had 1,000 different bottles of Cab Franc in his cellar of the Black Rock Inn. Because he knows, like I know, and the Dan that's going to join us in a second knows, that when Cab Franc is made right, it is otherworldly. It has finesse, it has depth, it has balance, it has unsurpassed purity. It is really, really good. And what's in my glass tonight is an example of that. So let's bring on the man who's going to educate us on all things Cabernet Franc, but also the proprietor, JAX. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan Parrott from JAX Vineyard.
Hey, happy Friday.
Wild.
Happy Friday, guys.
Happy Friday is right. Good to see you.
Yeah.
And I'm not blowing smoke. This is outstanding.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I need to put a little in my glass in a moment. It's funny you mentioned Jeff. I do know Jeff very well. Jeff put together something called the Cab Franc off.
The Cab Franc off.
We would do it every year. And I'd love to participate, where we would all donate 6 bottles to the cause. And he would blind taste them. He'd invite winemakers in one day. And so you'd be sitting next, it'd be like Kirk, Venge and Philippe Melka and Heidi Barrett. And you'd be blind tasting everybody's wines and you would rate them. And then you would try and guess your own. And then the next day, the public could do it. And then he had food. It was a great event, but they were all Cab Francs. And what was great about it, because you could figure out what you liked and you didn't know the price point, you didn't have a name on it, and then you just really figured out what was in the bottle. So it was always interesting to get winemakers going, oh, this must be my wine, and it wasn't their wine, or this is really, they low score a wine and then it happened to be their wine.
Oh God, I think that would be terrifying.
It was absolutely, but it was a good amount of fun if you didn't go into it, doing that. But it was a good amount of fun to try everybody's Cab Franc, and then we rated them and seen who we thought was the best out of the lineup of like 25 Cab Francs.
Yeah, super cool. It was very sad to see that happen to the property, and I know he had sold it. It was interesting. He was a lodging partner of Cellar Angels for a few years, so
okay.
Our guests got preferred rates, and he was a super character. And boy, I didn't know anybody that liked Cab Franc more, and with good reason. And I think Cab Franc is, I don't know, redheaded stepchild, or it just doesn't seem to get the notoriety that it should. And I've got some opinions on that, but I'm not the guest star of the show. I'd be curious, what are your opinions on kind of great Cab Franc and why it doesn't have the commercial recognition that it should?
I think people just, they don't know it, and they order what they know. 9 out of 10 people order what they know, what they're comfortable with. They don't try, they don't step outside the box a lot. So when we do tastings and events, that's how we sell a lot of our wine, is because we're a smaller brand. So to get our wine in their glass, and whether it's a Cab Franc or a Chardonnay or whatever it may be, it's the same thing. It's you go for what you're comfortable with. And Cab Franc, there's not a lot of it out there. It's like I said, there was probably 20 to 25 that we would put together in Napa Valley, and that's all the people that were producing it. There wasn't any more than 25 at the time. And so I don't think there's a lot of it out there. So it's scarcity, and people don't know it. So you always gravitate towards what you know. And so I think that's kind of why.
That's a good point. I agree with you. And we do want to encourage people to venture outside the box a little bit. There's the big 6 of Riesling, Sauv Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot, Cab, Merlot. Once you get past those 6, there's a whole world of wine out there that we need to open everyone's eyes to. Those of you that grabbed some of Nick Goldschmidt's Carmenere from those 100-year-old vines, way north in Dry Creek, that is also a pretty special. But the 100-year-old Carmenere vines, not many people even have had Carmenere. What is why am I blanking? Yes, it was Mission Controls, hang on, she's talking to me from the booth. So yes, Cabernet Franc is one of Carignan. It was Carignan. But while you brought up kind of how not much of is planted out there, Brent got the question correct about the Loire Valley in Chinon in France. I'm gonna early go into our first poll question. So those of you that are new, it is an honor system. Everybody is in for $25, and we keep track. So Brent's actually up a lot of money, but he lets it ride every week. So we're going to go into plantings of Cabernet Franc. What % of global plantings of Cabernet Franc are located in France? And I'm going somewhere with this. And Dan, I don't know if you know.
What % of global France? I don't know offhand. I don't know offhand. I know that, Loire Valley, of course, is, that's their primarily, that is their red varietal in Loire. And there's a little bit down in Bordeaux. And those would be the two places in France that I would think of. Outside of that, I don't know of any other place. So I would think that a lot in Chile, Argentina, which are, a lot bigger than the areas, wine countries are a lot bigger than the area. So I would think a lot of it would be in Chile or Argentina, maybe.
Well, of interest, and I'm going to read Chad Angelo's answer, and I can say Chad's last name because it's the name of his winery is Angelo Cellars, and winemaker as well. So Dan, you guys should probably meet. But I do like one of the first wines that gave Chad that aha moment of wine was the Beringer 3rd Century Howell Mountain Cab Franc of 1996, and Cab Franc has the ability to stop you in your tracks because of just that purity, the finesse, the precision that you would think it's a Cabernet Sauvignon, but it's a little bit, it's medium bodied, but boy, it's a delicious wine. The answer here is, in fact, 70% of the global Cabernet Franc plantings are in France, and it's split fairly evenly between the Loire and Bordeaux, with about 15,000 hectares apiece, so 30,000 hectares in France. But you're right, it is grown in a variety of areas, including the United States. And what most people don't know is its versatility. So you used to grow some, but tell us about why you now do a single bottling of it and instead of blending it.
Sure. So we bought the property in the early 90s, and we had really great Cabernet Sauvignon vineyards on there. They were getting very old. They were in their 40s, 40, 42 years old, which is quite old for Cabernet vines. And they just start producing less and less fruit. So before we replanted the whole vineyard, we decided, well, we're not going to replant it all at once. We'll replant it in quarters. So we always have a little bit of product coming off the vine, because it takes 4 years once you replant to get anything off of the vine. So when we did that, we decided to first figure out what clones of Cabernet Sauvignon grew in the types of climate that we were, because we had 3 different soil types just in our vineyard alone. And we have some rock that goes through the vineyard. And so we kind of planted it exactly the same way as they do in Bordeaux, which is about 90 to 95% Cabernet and a little bit of Petit Verdot and a little bit of Cab Franc. And so we had those varieties there just for blending into our final product of a Cabernet Sauvignon. So we were producing Cabernet Sauvignon since 96. And then in 2008, we were tasting the barrels separately, because when we bring in the blocks of the vineyard, we vitrify them separately. They go into their own barrels. And then a year later, we decide what goes into the blend. So at a year from the date, we still have our Cab Franc all separate. Petit Verdot is separate. And the 3 different types of Cabernet are all separate. And then that's at the time where we really get our real eyes on the prize and go, okay, these are our best barrels. We're going to set those aside for our Block 3 program, which is our Reserve Cabernet. And we were looking at the Cab Franc, and we're like, we want to use a little bit of this to blend into our Cabernet, but this is so good on its own. Why don't we just bottle it on its own? And not very many people were doing that at the time.
Well, I'm going back to kind of the Jeff Orlick and the Frankoff. Did you have any idea, like, hey, I've tasted this person's Cab Franc,
sure,
and this is the stuff we need to figure out how he or she does it, and that's what we're after stylistically?
So at the time, I had tried a lot of Loire Valley Cab Franc, which I like, but it's a little lighter in style. It's a lot more herbaceousness and a lot more of that green pepper. Those Pyrazines are really in there. But I can appreciate them if I know they're coming at me. Now, the Cabernet Franc of Bordeaux is definitely a riper style, traditionally a little lighter than your traditional Cabernet, or sometimes at kind of the same likeness, with a little bit of the herbaceousness. And the classic wine from Bordeaux, that the Chateau Cheval Blanc, is 50% Cabernet and 50% Cab Franc. And so that was kind of my first take on it, and that's probably a $700 bottle of wine. You don't see that very often. But I actually went there and tried their Cabernet Franc on its own while making ours. And I said, this is what we need to do. And it's an exciting tour. They have 50 different plots in their vineyard, and they separate everything 50 different, blends. And then they blend what they want together. So I had tasted several Cab Francs, and we just liked it so much, and we all got behind it and said, I want to drink this. So the first time we made it, it was 46 cases, so 2 barrels. Yeah. And the rest of it goes blended into our Cabernet, which generally blends 2-3% of our overall Cabernet bottle will be Cab Franc.
I jumped ahead because I'm very excited about this wine, but let's back up a little bit and tell me about your history, even before JAX. How'd you, where are you from? When did you decide, hey, this is actually a pretty cool industry? You mean I can get paid to do something and drink wine?
Yeah, so my background is I went to school in Arizona. I grew up in Michigan, went to school in Arizona. To put myself through college, I worked in a fine dining restaurant at the Arizona Biltmore Hotel. And
which school in Arizona?
I went to ASU. My wife went to U of A. We are a split household here, and I get to hear about it all the time. But so I put myself through college working in fine dining, and realized real quick that you're there to make tips, and you're to raise a check average. If you know more about wine, you can sell more wine, you can sell better wine, you can upsell. And so we always had to take these wine courses. And so I just loved it. And then I worked in New York. I have a master's degree in photography. I was a war photographer for years. And Kevin Zarelli came up to me one day and said, you know a lot about wine at Windows of the World. He goes, you should come work for me. I said, I'm not in the wine business. I'm a photographer. This is what I do. And he said, well, just come by on Monday. I went and saw him on Monday, and I highly suggest. He has a book called Windows on the World Wine School. And it's the best $20 book you'll find on wine. Great introduction. And I helped him with the program, and I did it for free. It was Monday nights. I was in my 20s, and what better way to learn about wine is to go to his class. And so he taught me how to teach education on wine. So when the internet blew up, my business kind of went down because it all became about digital photography and who could get the image there the fastest. It was very dangerous. I was working in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Syria, you name it, wherever there was a conflict, I was. And so I loved wine, and kind of went back into the restaurant business and said, I don't want to work these hours. Then started working on the supplier side. And so I worked for an import company importing wine from Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And then I worked for a French import company and got to work with 50 producers in France, 50 producers in Italy, and realized, how are you making this, whether it's Cab Franc or Chardonnay? And really got to study with all of these people, going over several times. And so the French company sold, and I was on my own looking for something in the right place, right time. Kimberly Jackson of JAX was looking to kind of grow the brand, and said, I'm looking to bring someone on. I said, well, if this is a partnership, I'd be interested. And so I took over the day-to-day. So what I do for the winery is everything from, you name it, production to sales to you name it.
Chief glass washer. I grab
Chief
a broom.
glass washer. Yeah, yes, exactly. Trivia night host this year or this week.
Awesome.
Yes.
Peter G. Hello. Monica. Hello. Moira. Hello. Maka. Hello. Good to see you all. Karen, I said hello to you in writing, but great to see you. John B. Jim B. is in the house. So, and what year did Kimberly decide to bring you on as a partner?
That would have been December of 2012. So 10 years ago.
Okay, so you had your 10-year anniversary
Yes,
last year,
yes,
couple
yes.
6 months or so ago. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
And what was the winery at production wise 10 years ago, and what is it at today?
10 years ago, we were doing 5,000 cases, and a majority of that, we were doing 400 cases of Cabernet from the estate, and then we were using the fruit into a blend that we make under a second label called Y3. And our Y3 program is a little bit more everyday wines, less oak, less mallow, cleaner, fresher, brighter style wines. Those retail from $20 to $28. So great, fun wines. All the vineyards that I'm sourcing the fruit from are super highly rated vineyards, whether it's Beckstoffer Chardonnay or Pinot Noir from Dutton Ranch, just really great fruit sources. It's just, I'm kind of making these fresher, cleaner, brighter style wines, slightly lower in alcohol, lower in price point, that you can open on a Tuesday night and not break the bank. JAX is our label that is a little more serious. These are the wines that the critics like. These are wines you can lay down. The whole production on those is about 2,500 cases. Under the Y3 brand, it's about 20,000 to 25,000 now. So we're up to 25 to 27,000. When I started 10 years ago, we were at 5,000 total. So, yeah.
And when do you take the foot off the accelerator?
Now. I'm tired. At the end of the day, it's a lot of wine to sell, and I still do it all. I do all the market work. I literally have one full-time employee. She works in my tasting room in San Francisco. I have a couple of part-time people that work in the tasting room, but literally I do everything myself with Kirk, Venge, my winemaker. So whether it's blending, bottling, I'm there every single day. And then I'm on the road, what used to be every other week pretty much. And then COVID happened, and now I'm getting away with about once a month traveling.
Right.
But I'm about to hit a 3-week travel, don't come home for 3 weeks, solid trip, which is not the best, but it'll be fun. You got to make the most of it.
Planes, trains, and automobiles for 3 weeks, just about.
Correct. Living in a hotel. Yes. It'll be 3 weeks, 21 days will probably be about 15 hotels. Different hotels. You start to get a little wild because you're like, oh, I swear I was on the second floor and now I'm on the 5th floor. You just,
I get it. Yeah. You come walking off the elevator, like, hang on, whoa. All the carpeting looks the same. My room key is not working. This is bad.
I've been there. Yes, I've been there. Yes, exactly.
And you mentioned winemaker Kirk Venge, and that's no easy feat to have Kirk make your wine. And why don't you wax poetic a little bit about Kirk? And just for those of you that don't know Kirk, Kirk is a legend because he was at his father's knees walking through the valley. His father, Niels Venge, had the first 100-point wine in Napa Valley. I think it was the 86 Groth.
85.
Oh, so close.
Yes.
So how did you find Kirk, and how did you convince him to say, hey, why don't you come over here and make some wine?
So Kirk is my age, 47, and I didn't grow up in the area, so I didn't know him that well. Kimberly and Trent had the vineyard going for 5 years at the time, and we had probably 2 or 3 different winemakers that were helping out. I mean, it was really small. It was a couple hundred cases. So we just said, hey, we're looking to do this with our vineyard. And Kirk was very young then, in 2021. So that would have been 2001. So 20 years ago, we were his first client. Correct. And so it was just our 10 acres, and we were his first client, and he was making wine with his father. They had Venge family vineyards at the time. And so they had their own label going, but he was now acting as a consultant for us. And then it just kind of grew, and he probably makes wine for 15 different labels now. But what's great with us is we've been with him so long, we get along with him so well and we've been by his side since day one, that we make our wine at Venge. So we make our wine under his house. And that's another way that we can kind of keep our costs down. So we have the vineyard, we have a tasting room in San Francisco, but we don't have the actual multi-million-dollar winery over our heads. So we just grow grapes and make wine, but we can do it under his space because he has this too much space for himself. So Kirk has been with us since 2001, working with our vineyard and helped us replant, got to pick his own clones, what he thought would grow best in the areas. And then in 2000, when I took over JAX, I brought him in on the Y3 program. And so the Y3 program, these wines are not his style. He makes bigger, bolder, known for Cabernet, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. And these wines are more my flavor profile, which is more of a European style with lighter, slightly less alcohol, less oak, less mallow, and cleaner and fresher. So two very different styles of wine. The JAX is more traditional. The Y3 is more traditional European or everyday.
Well, and it's interesting when you talked about the price point of the Y3. I don't know that there's a Kirk Venge wine in the Valley for $25, $30.
No. They're all $100 plus.
Yeah,
He makes wine for B Cellars, Bacio Divino and Jansen, Macaulay, his own label, Venge Vineyards, and 1111. And
that's right.
Yeah, so he's got his name on a lot of high ticket wines out there, and they get great scores. They do really well. I imagine they're on a very similar program as we and what we do as far as the oak regiment and the barrels that we're using and things like that. And it basically comes down to site and source of what you're producing when you're picking and those final decisions you're making in the cellar.
Interesting. What a great treasure to have. And I mean, especially given that he's been now walking the rows for 22 years, was involved in clonal selection, that gives him just an unbelievable ability to handcraft the wines from essentially the soil to the bottle, because he's seen every step of it.
Yep.
All right, Hans, I need you to get ready since we gave the first question a little bit early. I'm going to launch the second question now, some redemption, because there was only 3 correct answers on the number of global plantings in France. So we'll now bring it back home and ask the question, how many acres of Cabernet Franc are planted in Napa? When you think there was 30,000 hectares in France alone, how many Cabernet Franc acres are planted in Napa? This is a perfect time to take a sip.
How many acres Cab Franc planted in Napa? Now, I would say 95%, I would guess 98% of the Cab Franc planted in Napa is blended into Cabernet Sauvignon.
I believe that. See, I can see answers shifting right now. So the honor system is getting thrashed by the Angels and the Sipsters, because now people are waiting. They go to their phone and they're changing answers. I'm a little bit.
They're Googling it.
I heard someone say, Siri, how many Cabernet Franc? No. All right, I'm gonna give this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. See, no, you just can't have this many guesses be accurate. But the correct answer, this is the honor system. So if you cheated, please raise your hand. The correct answer is, in fact, 1,200 acres of Cabernet Franc in Napa. But there's an interesting factoid about Cabernet Franc recently, and its price per ton that I think would shock people. Dan, what are you hearing?
Yes, so we do a valley average. So everything that gets brought in at the end of the year, we have to take a survey for the state of California. And we have to put in whether we sold grapes or whether we used all the grapes. And then they take a survey of it, and it'll tell you exactly how much Merlot was grown and what it was sold for and whatnot. And the valley average of Cabernet Sauvignon is about $9,700 in Napa Valley per ton. This is the first year that Cabernet Franc outdid Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's around $1,000 per ton. And that's
$10,000.
Yeah, $10,000. Sorry.
Okay, you said 1,000. I'm like,
sorry,
no, that all day long.
No, $10,000 per ton, and that's the first time ever that it's risen higher than Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's supply and demand. Like you said, there's 1,200 acres planted. I would say 98% of that gets blended into Cabernet Sauvignon. Very little of it is on its own, and even of the extreme of that is 100% bottled like we do.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. I was just curious how many folks are producing a single varietal Cab Franc. It's got to be under a dozen producers.
Oh yeah, under a dozen. There's a lot of people that will do a Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc, but it only has to be 80, well, 75% Cabernet Franc, and it's blended with maybe 25% Merlot
Right.
or Cab. And of that, I would say the Valley average price point of Cabernet Franc is probably $80 to $100 a bottle. And
Jeez.
ours is 65.
Yeah. And I know I could look it up on the tech sheet, but what
Mhm.
is the case production? You said 4 barrels of this or
4 barrels, so about 100 cases.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is it a fan favorite among the JAX faithful?
Yes, yes. So a lot of people come in, knowing our JAX Cabernet Sauvignon because we produce more of it. It's about 1,800 cases per vintage. And then once they come to our tasting room, about 99% of it is sold in a tasting room. And I use a little bit for dinners and a little bit will go retail, but not much at all. Very, very little. It's all online. It's all direct to consumer except for tonight, selling through Cellar Angels. And I like to use it in dinners, something special. If someone's bringing me to Florida or something to do a dinner, I'll bring that wine because it's so special.
Absolutely. No, I was going to say that would be a showstopper, if you will, because they're expecting kind of the usual repertoire of maybe some bubbles, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot, and then you pull out this. It's unusual and it's a attention grabber for certain.
Yeah.
I want to actually talk a little bit about the history of Cabernet Franc. When did you first start falling in love with it?
Gosh, late 90s were more the Loire Valley style. And then when I started drinking more and more Napa in the 90s, there still wasn't anybody really producing straight Cab Franc, not really. So then you got to kind of go to Bordeaux, where I think it was a little more readily available. And then, so I've been drinking it probably since the late 90s, early 2000s. But
And
as
were
we
you
make it, yeah.
were you exposed to it because of your trips over there or through industry work? Or did someone say, here, try this?
Working in restaurants, you wanted to have a
Okay.
vast, you're all shooting for a Wine Spectator Grand Award. So, I was doing the Quartermaster Sommeliers and the Society of Photographic or sort of Society of Wine Educators and things like that. Yeah. And so you want to expose yourself to a little bit of everything. And even in Northern Italy out of Friuli, there's a little bit of Cab Franc up there that we had a producer in our portfolio back then that did some really great Cab Franc, but it was only 200-300 cases. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot out there, or not a lot of straight Cab Franc that's just even produced.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And Jeff hasn't prompted me, but I am going to go to Google Earth as we talk about the history of Cabernet Franc and kind of start, because this will be interesting. Because we're not going to start at our usual spot in the Napa and Sonoma wine regions, but rather we were going to start in Spain. So you talked about, the Loire Valley right up here. There's the Gironde River and Bordeaux's right in here. But the origins of Cabernet Franc actually are from the Basque region. And I believe it was Davis, that did some GNA stuff and or DNA stuff. Want to know what GNA is. But when you think about it, it kind of makes logical sense that the research indicates that, yeah, it was made here. Then it was just a short boat ride up to Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And then from even there, it was another short boat ride up to the Loire River and into Loire. And it's fascinating because these two places are only about 350 miles apart or so. So it's not that far.
Yeah.
But the regions are totally different from a growing perspective. And you talked about the different soil types that you have. One of the things I've noticed about some of the Basque region wineries and vineyards is, this is very calcified, red, iron rich, and Loire has a lot of clay. And so two entirely different regions, which is, I wonder why it has done so well in the Loire Valley, because it flourishes there. And even a little bit further away in Chinon, you see, and again, someone should make a movie, A River Runs Through It, and talk about vineyards, because there's a few vineyard blocks right here in the Loire Valley in Chinon, and most of this is Cabernet Franc. But it's I think we should do a river cruise here, since we had a river cruise on the Rhone earlier this year. We might have to do one in the Loire Valley. But this is a very, very magical tapestry. It's unbelievable how much is grown here. But I want to compare and contrast this soil type to, you talked a little bit about the soil, the 3 different soil types you have at JAX, but run through those again. And what does the Cab Franc sit on, those rows?
Sure, those rows would be more clay.
Okay.
And then there's a big rock that goes through underneath the ground. That's where we had our Petit Verdot that we just clipped and then planted, regrafted those into Cabernet Franc. And we just did it 6 months ago, in the spring, actually in March, so not even 6 months ago, and they're already sprouting, and we're really excited about that because the Petit Verdot just didn't do great there. And we have volcanic soil as well, but we chose to put our Cabernet Sauvignon there. But where it changes to clay, we figured out that we didn't think that the Cab would do as well as Cab Franc, and it was an extra piece of the vineyard that wasn't planted before. Right where we planted the Cab the Cab Franc and the Petit Verdot, it was an extension of the vineyard that had never been planted before.
And it's interesting, we just had an educational session a couple of weeks ago on budding and grafting, and they talked about, and it's interesting that you said it's already starting to sprout. That rootstock obviously has a ton of vigor in it, and when you bud it over we talked and learned about some varietals will take faster than others, and you'll see it go right to sprout very quickly. So clearly, the Cabernet Franc likes where it is sitting right now, much more than the Petit Verdot did.
Yeah, and we won't get anything from it this year, but in hopes maybe something next year of little, but probably 4 years before you really start seeing something. 7 years, it's still in its kind of teenage years, and at about 10 is when it starts really producing some grapefruit, and then that'll probably go till 40, 45 years old. Yeah.
And here's the Loire River, and again, beautiful pieces of property. Vineyards everywhere. This has got cruise potential written all over it. Now, if you have an air sickness bag, I recommend getting it, because we're going to go all the way back over to California. And it does get a bit unnerving. So the sipsters know that this is the playground for Cellar Angels. We are specialists, subject matter experts, whatever you want to say, in Napa and Sonoma. It is where we have lived for Cellar Angels since 2010, have been traveling there since the mid-90s. But it really is an unusual playground for winemaking because of the different soil types, as Dan was just describing the soil types in their vineyard alone. But there's more soil regions or soil series here than in France. It has somewhere in the vicinity of half of the world's soil series are in these 2 counties. So, it's just an amazing tapestry for anybody that wants to make wine. Not to mention the coastal influences, the microclimate influences, the different topographies. It's just a very, very special region for wine production. And I'm glad they learned that versus apples or prunes or dates or apricots, which is what they used to have in a lot of the places. And it bears mentioning, this is classified as a Mediterranean region, which basically indicates the weather patterns where you're going to have the heavier wet springs and rain, also the warm summers that are changing globally right now. But only 3% of the world is designated as Mediterranean climate. So it's a pretty special place. JAX is pretty far north. About as close to that line as you can get.
Correct.
And the line is not drawn to scale for anybody that's curious. I hand drew that myself, so I'm not exactly certain where the stakes are, but it's pretty close. How long have they owned the property?
Since 92. Before it was an AVA of Calistoga. We were on the front of trying to get it classified as its own AVA Calistoga with Bo Barrett from Chateau Montelena. And that finally went through. I gotta say, it was about the 2001 vintage. And Calistoga. We're at the northernmost part of Calistoga. If you drive past our house, you're pretty much into Knights Valley. And then you're up to Peter Michael.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I threw Knightsbridge, which is
Yep.
the now second winery in Knights Valley. Peter Michael's been there for a while. But it just shows you how far, and Calistoga is down here. So
Correct. Yeah. Which is
you're,
about 5 miles south. Mhm.
yep. Which is, interesting how far north you are, but definitely worth the trip. So the property you mentioned, I think, is how many acres under vine? Oh, by the way,
About-
Tamar Bay, most of the folks know that from Cellar Angels because Barry and Jennifer have been on the program quite a few times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's where Kirk lives, right next door to that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I see them guys all the time. JAX Vineyards, we're 10 acres under vine. We have another 5 acres where our house is, and that's the Jackson's house. That they're there more often in the summer home. They live down in Hillsborough full time. But the house was meant to be kind of a summer home and in wine country. Mhm.
Super cool. And the Cabernet Franc vineyard I'm taking a stab is here.
It's a little bit south of that. It's the first rows of the vineyard there. Yep. It's
Oh, right in here?
there. Yeah, yeah, right where your hands are. Yeah, exactly.
And that's the vineyard behind me, by the way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was, yep, exactly.
So this used to be just like what, 8 rows of Cabernet Franc, and now you've buttered over a whole bunch. So
Yeah, we're up to about 20 rows now. I think it was 12 before, and now it's up to 20. Mhm.
interesting. I love the fact that you state, when you plant a vine, it's going to take about 4 years to get anything remotely close to marketable. 7 is better. Because there's a lot of mass-produced houses out there that'll be putting fruit off of vines that are 2 and 3 years old in bottle, and I'm shaking my head going, that can't be good.
Yeah, and it's in order to go into a cheaper bottle or less expensive, in Napa Valley. I mean, everybody knows Napa Valley, but it's only, gosh, I think it's maybe 3% of, not even 3% of all California wine in general. And it's so funny that of the smallest degree, everyone knows Napa Valley for this, but it's all about quality. And so,
Correct.
yeah, you can make that product, but it's not going to be good. And so with the little that we have, it's generally, gosh, what is it now? It's around, what is it, 30 miles north to south, and maybe 7 miles wide, something like that. And so the little rows that we have, we cut back all of our fruit, and we're making, maybe 2 tons per acre. And so versus 15 tons per acre that you might be doing Sauvignon Blanc in Lake County or something. So
Right.
we're really cutting it back because we want whatever we produce to be the best of the best.
And we just showed you how far north this is in Calistoga, but if you happen to be in the San Francisco area, they actually have a downtown tasting room. So you have a ballpark here, and the tasting room is just up the street. And it's how long has it been there?
9 years, almost 10. Yeah, almost 10 years.
God, I can't believe it's been 10 years. I remember when you're like, hey, we're opening up a tasting room.
Exactly. So that tasting room, so if anybody is flying in or out of San Francisco and going to Sonoma or just spending time in the city, we operate that Wednesday through Saturday. It runs like a little more like a wine bar, so people can come in for a glass of wine, a taste, a formal tasting, a bottle, whatever they like. And we're often doing events there with live music and things like that. Tonight is pizza and Pinot, so it's actually a pizza night.
And trivia.
And trivia maybe once a month. That was our first this week, and it was quite successful.
Well, I like it because it's indoor, outdoor, and
Yeah.
those are obviously all the rave and have been, and you got great weather, so it's a cool, super cool hip joint to go have a glass of wine, especially if you're not going to be up in the valley, you're there for a conference and stuff like that, which a lot of us are now. Business travel and conventions are starting to be more in person than remote, so that's good. Taking a ball game and stopping for a drink post game. I mean, it absolutely is a gorgeous little spot.
You don't get very many patios in San Francisco. It's everything is pretty much built up to the sidewalk, and so you don't get a lot of patios, and so it's pretty unique to have an outdoor space like that.
Well, and I find it interesting that we've got some agri rooftops trying to get some carbon credits. So very pleased with those entrepreneurs over there. But yeah, there's not a lot of patios, not a lot of rooftop. Is there a lot of rooftop tastings or bars in San Francisco?
They're becoming to be the popular thing. Yeah. This
Yeah,
year,
they're-
last year. Mhm.
Yep, it's pretty cool. I'm glad they're doing that with a lot of buildings. I know, when we lived in Chicago, there was anywhere between 15 and 20 you could choose from on a regular basis. That was super cool. Okay, let's break this bottle down and do flavor or aromas, flavors, and pairings. So we're going to
Sure.
put we're going to take your camera away and use your photographic memory instead of your lens. But give us a lens into what you're getting here on aromas.
Sure. Our Cabernet Franc is more red currant, raspberry, more red fruit. If in comparison to our Cabernet Sauvignon, which literally grows next to it, if you had them side to side, our Cabernet Sauvignon would be more blueberry, blackberry, more black fruit. And the Cabernet Franc is a little more red fruit. You get that violet, raspberry, red currant, licorice, a little bit of herbaceousness in graphite. And that is kind of the signature markers for Cabernet Franc. When I'm making this wine, and I'm taking the barrels and I'm deciding which barrels go into this, there are some because we pick it at full ripeness at the same time as our Cabernet Sauvignon. And the reason for that is I don't want that super green pepper herbaceousness coming out and being a distraction. I want it to be subtle and I want it to be in the background. So I want that red fruit in structure and a slight bit. So I want you to be able to smell it and go, oh, it is Cab Franc. I get a little bit of that green pepper, but a lot of people, it's just not for them because it's so much, it's so overpowering. And the way that I get around that is I let it fully mature and I let it hang a little bit longer than they would in the Loire Valley. So Loire Valley, they're picking slightly earlier than us. They want that green pepper. They want that herbaceousness. They're monitored by the government to pick at a certain varietal in a certain area at a certain ripeness. Well, it's the Wild West in California. We can do whatever we want to do. And so I'm making a Cab Franc for Cabernet wine or Cabernet Sauvignon lovers. And so if you like Cabernet Sauvignon, you most likely will like this Cabernet Franc.
I do, and I do. So you talked about the green bell pepper, and I am one of those individuals, I think, that has a hypersensitivity to it. I can pick it out in a heartbeat. Same thing with anise and black licorice and those sorts of things. Could have been, several nightmarish days in college on Sambuca. I don't know. What is Pyrazines?
So Pyrazines are, what we would say those are it's kind of like that. I don't know, how would you describe it? It's like greenness. It's a sensibility. It's something that you could pick up pretty, like you said, some people are detecting it more than others. But if you slow down and think about what you're smelling and think about what you're tasting, and it's this really kind of green is what we would describe it. And I don't know if people understand what green is without saying, well, it's that green peppery smell. It's that herbaceousness.
I like herbaceousness more than the green pepper or the overpowering green bell pepper type of thing. Now, Ivy has said she loves the hint of green pepper in this. And I actually like the way that's described. That's a hint.
Absolutely.
It's not hitting you over the head. Like you've just got hit in the face with the green pepper. And Dahlia likes it as well. Ivy says, Dahlia, what you would like. This is why I should have read that more clearly. So I agree with you. The Pyrazines, historically, I get them more in Chilean, Argentinian wines that seem to be picked earlier before they get full ripeness. They seem to be very pronounced. And Ivy might have a much more perceptible olfactory ability than I do. I don't get any green pepper on this, and I'm normally hypersensitive to it. So I love this wine. This wine is delicious.
It's like it's like any wine, you want to ask the question, whether it's Chardonnay and you're just like, if you like a stainless steel Chablis style, ask that question. Oh, is it buttery? Is it oaky? Like, describe it to me. And every Cab Franc is going to be the same. It's just as versatile as Chardonnay, I believe, on how green it is. And people that are making them in Napa Valley are most of them are, blending in Cabernet Sauvignon. So to kind of mute that greenness or that herbaceousness. And so we don't have to do that. I know that I'm going to make 100 cases of this. So I know what I want to grow it to. So I don't need to blend it down with anything because I know I'm growing it to be on its own.
Right. Does Kirk like Cabernet Franc?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he likes the, bigger, bolder style wines, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Petit Syrah. And I don't think he makes one on his own at Venge. I don't think so. But I know he gets some Beckstoffer Tokalon Cab Franc and some Cabernet. I know Macaulay does a Tokalon Cabernet Franc, which, it's $300 a bottle, I bet.
No, it is.
And I've helped them make it before, you know what I mean? Like it's in 2020 or 20 would have been the 2017 Tubbs fire. It was the four of us at the winery making the wine ourselves because we were, there was a police tape line, firefighter line that we couldn't get to the winery where we had to sneak in the winery just to make our wine.
Jeez. So now we've got aromas. What is getting similar flavors, kind of the bright red fruit?
Yes, exactly. So bright red fruit, that candied cherry, strawberry. The way we make it though, it's traditionally more of a medium bodied wine, but because we put, we grow this to about 26 bricks in sugar. So it has a lot of sugar to it. It ferments out at about 14.5, 14.6, something like that. We're leaving there's still a lot of fruit to the wine. We're getting a lot of color by doing about a 14-day maceration, cold soak, and fermentation. It's about 14 days. So we're getting a lot of color and a lot of structure out of those skins. And then on top of that, we're doing about 65% new French oak, or in this case, we probably start with 5 barrels and we get about 3 of those barrels will be new. And then by the time, the angels share, as we say, we get down to about 100 or, a little more than 100 cases of this wine.
Is it really the angel share, or is it just you or Kimberly going in with a thief? And
There has been many days where Kirk and I had to try every barrel in the wine cellar.
Exactly.
Yes, there's been a few late nights, you could say. At the end of the day, it's fun. We have a good time doing it, but you gotta know what that product tastes like,
Exactly. Yeah. Through all phases of its life.
Through all phases.
And what about pairings as far as food?
Sure.
Anything quick and simple, or is this kind of you need to smoke some meat for this one? What is your go-to?
Anything that I think Cabernet Sauvignon can go with, this Cabernet Franc can go with, because it has the same structure as our Cabernet. It has the same body and profile as it. Just the only difference in flavor profile is this is, like I said, a little more red fruit versus blueberry, blackberry, and slight hint of herbaceousness. But the structure is the same as the Cabernet. So I would say anything grilled, anything charred, anything smoked. I do have a smoker, or I do a lot of things on the smoker, and this would go with anything.
Yep.
Even a smoked chicken, because it has so much flavor and so rich. The chicken could stand up to it, but anything red meat, pork, anything grilled. And I love that char that you do on a hot grill as well, that sear. That char on that goes really well with our Cabernet and Cabernet Franc.
No, I agree. And it's interesting because Cabernet Franc typically has medium tannins, and this one, I think the tannins are really well integrated already, and it's a 2020 and can still age. So if someone wanted to lay this down, what do you think its aging potential is?
Some people say 15 years, but I always say, people ask me this every day, that I like fruit in my wine, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. I like fruit in my wine, and I think 7 years from the vintage, the wine still is vibrant and has really good fruit. And then I think after 7 years, I think that fruit starts to drop. And
Okay.
so I just did a Cab Franc tasting in Lodi, and it was Cab Francapalooza. Yep. It was the first year. And I said, I want to be at this. They had already did all the paperwork. They had already did, like who's coming and who's, and what it's all about. Already sold tickets. And I raised my hand and I said, what is this? I want to be there. And so it was Lang and Reed and myself were the only two Napa guys that went out for it. And it was 100 degrees and we were pouring outside Cabernet
Oh
Franc.
God.
Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? It was a good overall event, but for the VIP hour, that people that paid a little bit extra to come, they wanted us to pour something special. So I pulled our 9, 10, and 11 vintage, and I poured those wines. And the 2009 was their favorite, and
Oh,
everybody wanted to buy the 2009. So I mean, it just goes to show that, I mean, these small made wines can age. We
Right.
touch every barrel of this. We're making it to age. Yet where we are in Calistoga, hottest days, coldest nights in Napa Valley, we get a very fruit forward, lush profile. And I like to say our tannins are really well integrated and subtle, and they don't need that cellar time like mountain fruit may. How Mountain, all this mountain fruit's great vineyards and great wines, but they need more time in a bottle than us. We do get people that call us 1 year from getting their wine club or buying the bottle at 1 year, and they get to their last bottle or whatever, and they say, oh, I need another case of this. At 1 year, that wine has drastically changed and is a whole new animal, and it's tasting really well. But I think at 7 years, it's even tasting better. And for those who like older wines, it will go 10, 15 years, no problem.
That's awesome. Greg has a question that indicates he's been buying the Cab Franc since the 2016 vintage. The 2017 had a JR Vineyard designation, which was different, I think, than the other years. The vintage had a bit of that green pepper upon release, but that is all resolved now and is a nice wine. What is the vineyard designation difference?
There wasn't a JR we changed our name back in 2000. The label was the same, did not have a JR on it. There maybe they're thinking JAQK, or like the cards, but our label from 2008 to 2001 was exactly the same. The only thing we changed on it, we didn't even cite a source. It was just JAX Cabernet Franc, Calistoga. When we changed the label in 2015, I took Calistoga off the front label. No, is it still on there?
Yeah, he was talking about the 2017 seemingly had a JR vineyard designation.
No, it's always been our vineyard.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he's thinking of the same wine or whatnot, but I mean, I make the labels and make the wine. So I don't know if he's thinking of something different or
no, all good. Now, how does someone get to come taste JAX? They go to the tasting room in San Francisco.
Sure, we have regular hours at the tasting room in San Francisco, and then in Napa, we're technically zoned agricultural, and we're not really supposed to do tastings at the vineyard, but occasionally we do, especially for Cellar Angels. If you give us a call at the winery or email us and say, hey, I'm going to be in Calistoga or Napa Valley, we want to come see you. We do some private tastings up there at the house. It's what I like to tell people, it's what Napa Valley used to be 20 years ago, because there's no buses coming through. There's no private tours coming through. It's literally us, you sitting at the picnic table, overlooking the vineyard, and really kind of seeing what the valley has to offer, which is pretty cool. We do those tastings, and I try to do, it's either myself or my partner, Kimberly, generally, that do those tastings. And those are on a one-on-one basis. Have to be scheduled. I would suggest at least 2 weeks ahead of time, and then I organize my whole day around it, because it's from my house to the vineyard, it's an hour, half hour, 45, and to set up for it and everything, it's kind of a big deal. It's several hours of our time. So it is a big deal for us to do things up there. We do once every 2 years, we'll do a kind of like a fall event up there, but 99% of our tastings are in San Francisco. But if you're lucky enough to have some time and our calendars meet up in the vineyard, it's a pretty cool experience because, it was something that we don't do very often. And it's something that you're sitting there with the owner looking at the grapes that the wine came from. I can't hear you, Martin.
Oh, that's probably my
Oh,
fault.
there we go.
I was saying what Dan is describing is absolutely true. It is a photo opportunity like you wouldn't believe because you're sitting at a picnic table, right behind over my shoulder in the shade. You aren't 7 deep at a table or a tasting room or anything like that. There are no buses going by, and it's not as if you're like, okay, we've got to go. Your 15 minutes are up or 30 minutes are up. It is the way it used to be, and it's a very intimate tasting. Give Dan as much advance notice as possible, and I'm not talking hours, I'm talking days or weeks.
Weeks if possible.
Yeah,
The other option would maybe be doing something at Venge, like a barrel tasting or something like that. If you've never done a barrel tasting, I prefer vineyard because I like to taste the finished product. Barrel tasting is fun to do once, and you get a little education on how wine is made and where it comes from and where the grapes are coming in and whatnot. And that's fun to do once. But if I was going to Napa Valley, I'd probably schedule maybe if not a lot of places do the barrel tasting. We could do that at Venge. But try it once, and then once you've done it once, I would just go around and try finished product is what I prefer.
Yeah, those are fun, especially if you're doing them with people as cool as Dan or Kirk that know their stuff. Means that sincerely. Dan, thank you for spending some of your Friday with us. I really appreciate you fighting traffic for 2 hours and getting into home. Really special time. And Cabernet Franc, it is the other Cabernet. This wine is now been open for about an hour and a half. It is absolutely singing. And it does have some life. So I definitely think I agree with you. It could be 7 to 10 years. Chad Angelo, who was on, is going to be on Cellar Angels in a couple weeks. So definitely tune in for that. Next week, it is a first-time episode, Ask Martin Anything. So all cameras will be on. It'll be Ask Martin Anything. A couple rules for that. The college years are off limits. There will be no questions about college, but pretty much anything else from the industry is entirely fair game. As we say, everyone, to be a difference maker takes action. So we're trying to raise some money for Save the Family Farms. There is a ton of wine. 6 bottles gets you a contribution, free shipping. It's pretty impressive organization. And also, as we like to say, if you see a chance for kindness, take it. World needs a whole heck of a lot more kindness right now, and we can't do it without the Angels, can't do it without special guests like Dan. So Dan, thanks again. Great to see you. And I know you're going to be swinging through town in a month or so. So hopefully we can hook up again. Angels, be good to one another. Have a great, safe, happy, festive weekend and stay hydrated. Cheers all.
Cheers.